medical centers of the future that are going to be successful, in my opinion, are those who have strong medicine, strong engineering, and they're juxtaposed because they can feed on each other. And we'll talk about that a little more in just a moment. Another thing that I kind of knew but didn't is how many of the entrepreneurs and the people who helped make Silicon Valley were Rice graduates. And I knew all of them, actually. Burt McMurtry, who is kind of known as the Don of the Rice recruiting team in Silicon Valley, and he brought out many of these people. Ken Oshman, late Ken Oshman, who unfortunately died last year. Bob Maxfield, both at Rome, and also Walter Lawrenstein, which I did not know. Jimmy Tribig, Tandem, and also a very famous graduate of Rice, John Doerr, at Perkins. So Rice has a lot of its DNA in the Valley, and I think that you must be very proud of what you're doing here, and I think in the future you're going to have a great opportunity to create maybe a second medical Silicon Valley here. Before starting, I would like to explain this title just a moment. This is called the healthcare entrepreneur. It could be the biomedical entrepreneur. It could be the physician entrepreneur. And I think the principles are all the same in how you develop these kinds of skill sets. And I don't believe that anybody can teach you exactly how to be an entrepreneur. But I do think that courses like Jack gives and others can give you a lot of arrows to put in your quiver to allow you to do this better, faster, and higher. And I would encourage you, Jack has shared with me some of the materials of this course, I would encourage any of you that are interested to take Jack's course. Jack was a real leader when he was in California with Vanguard. I first met him at Spectrophysics, trying to get them to develop something for me in the laser. And he's had a wealth of experience. I think probably his biggest contribution is going to be all this feeding back and giving back, not only in philanthropy, but in his time and his experience. So Jack, thank you. Let's start with this. I'm going to start with a little comic book version here of things, so I don't want you to think that the thing is too juvenile. But I would like to start with the concept of why. Why be a medical device entrepreneur or a healthcare entrepreneur? As a surgeon or a doctor, why do this? 30 years ago, 40 years ago, even in the Valley, if you were doing something and you were at the medical school, it was all right to publish and research, and do research and publish, but it was looked upon a little askance if you were developing a product, and God forbid it had a profit to it. This was a scam. You were looked upon askance. Now, fast forward 40 years, you get several calls a week on how do you do it. And the medical centers are embracing this more. Stanford has embraced this idea of entrepreneurism very much and has a program I'm going to tell you about in a moment. But why should you, as a physician or an engineer, be a medical entrepreneur? Well, I think there's good reason for that, but I'd like for you to take a little test here. Now, we're not going to grade this test, but why be a healthcare entrepreneur? Would it be to provide better patient care, more stimulating life, make more money, nothing wrong with that. Self-satisfaction, you feel you've contributed to your society and others. Professional recognition and your professional societies, contribute to society. So mentally check the box or boxes that you think give you the most reason for being in this room here. And we'll come back to that. First of all, if we look at this from the standpoint of leveraging medical knowledge, and I'm going to try to convince you, if you're a doctor or you're an engineer, that by going in and becoming a healthcare entrepreneur, you're going to add tremendous value. And if you look at it, I like to think of it as let's think a lever, a board with a lever, and as you go to the right up there, you get increasing healthcare effect. Now this is directed more to the physician, but the engineer can fill in here. Now there's nothing wrong with a doctor treating one patient at a time. It's very valuable, it's very rewarding for the doctor. You get a little more leverage though if you have other providers that you're supervising, more nurses or technicians, and et cetera. You could treat even more people. Now, also, if you want to treat even more, you can teach others, which this medical center does. Turns out many-fold new doctors, they go off and do thousands of procedures that they learn here, and there's tremendous leverage from teaching others and expanding this idea. But probably the most leverage that can be gained is not just doing those things, but in addition, adding a new device, a drug, or coming soon, a new type of gene therapy or molecular therapy and diagnosis to our armamentarium. This gives the maximum. This allows you as a physician to treat millions of patients you will never see. And I think that is the maximum. Physicians, we're responsible for the health care of the country. And we should try to do that whenever we can. And let's take a look at two examples of this. Banting and Best, who we know for creating insulin, and Jonas Salk and the polio vaccine. Now, I don't think any of us here can perhaps have the hope that we're going to have the leverage that that did, helping a disease in a major way and essentially eradicating another disease. So keep that in mind when anybody says, why aren't you doing this? Why are you doing that? You're a little too into other things. So how do you become this kind of person? How do you become an inventor? Where does information come from that allows you to do this? You read about it. Where does it come from? And how does discovery come about? If you look at that, let's look at the source of it, which is somebody's idea that develops. Somebody has to have the core idea. And if we look at that, think about the first medical device. What was the first medical device? Have an idea? No one knows is the answer, but there was one. And if you go back, let's go back in the mist of time to the mammoth days, 50, 60, 70,000 years ago. All right, so some guy hears some mammoth sounds from the next valley and says, hey, there's a big herd of mammoths over there. Let's go over and get one of those. I'm tired of eating these berries and roots. And so they get in the cave and they sharpen up their spears and put on their leathers. And they go over to the next valley and they got this mammoth, and 25 or 50 of them are trying to bring this big mammoth down. And somebody gets gored. And they got a femoral artery bleed. Was the first device a tourniquet maybe made of sinew? Was there a gash and somebody sewed it up with a sinew and a bone arrow? But somebody did that. And why did they do that? The same way anybody here who's trying to invent something or develop a medical device, it's because they saw a clinical need. And that's where it all starts, is in clinical need. And doctors and engineers working in the biomedical area are in the perfect position to see that need, and in a better position than almost anyone else. So from that, and these are pre-Hellenic surgical instruments made of metal, as metallurgy came in, you can see some devices here. If you see here, there's a scalpel, there's a forceps. It's probably a curette. But these were invented by somebody who saw a need for them. Probably got a metallurgist to pound them out, fix them like that. And you go fast forward now to Da Vinci robot tips, which are very complex engineering to make this happen. But they're all the same. It's just that we're using technology and more technology all the time to create new combinations and new solutions. So with that background, where are the places that these ideas might come? I have a few myself that I like too, but generally, if you're in medicine, the operating room is a good place to get information. Watch in an operating room. We have a biodesign program at Stanford. One of the things we made, take the doctors and the engineers in that program, have them go into an operating room and stand there and write down 5 things that you could see done better. Do you see a nurse going over, opening a pack and fumbling with something? Does a surgeon start complaining about something? Does it take too long? Do they have to open a second pack because that thing wasn't adequate? Look at that. Look at something that you've seen in the operating room for 30 years and it hasn't changed. There's an opportunity. Either it's the perfect solution or it's a big opportunity. Another place is the patient's bedside. A lot of treatments are done at bedsides, follow-up care, IV treatments, pumps, etc. There's a great opportunity there. In the journals, you read the journals, you read somebody's article from somewhere else and say, gee, I think I have an idea that might work for that. And one of my favorite places is hardware stores. Walking along, watching the fasteners, looking at the fasteners, the drills, the chisels, all the stuff that is in hardware stores. And I just learned this evening that Billy Cohn loves to go to Home Depot and look at things and get gadgets and play with. And another one, a favorite of mine, is gourmet cooking stores. They are particularly great because if you think back in surgery, food and meat processing is very similar to surgery. They have a lot of similar characteristics, and cutting and crushing and et cetera. Something about going, I can't go into any kind of shop anywhere if they have a tray of knives or something. I almost have to look at them. But these are places where the information that you can get is. Now, where is the information? How do you get it? Why do some people get this information and others not? I like to think of the world as raining information. We've all seen rain coming down, but think of each raindrop as a piece of alphabet soup. And it's raining all the time, all the time. It's raining in this room right now. And there are 2 kinds of people in the world. They're out in that rain, walking around. There are fork carriers, and the other, there are spoon carriers. Now the fork carriers go along, they don't even know this rain is there. It drops through the tines of the fork, and that information is gone. The spoon carriers are out there walking around, and a little letter hits, and a few letters hit, and finally, they start to spell something, or they put together to create an idea or an image. You take Sir Alexander Fleming, the great British bacteriologist, and in the early days, they had many Petri dish experiments, and the bacteriologists were complaining that their experiments were getting screwed up because some of the colonies were being killed. I think most of us in medicine kind of know this story, maybe. And Fleming didn't just accept that. He said, why are they being killed? And he found out it was the penicillium mold, and he isolated the active ingredient, which he named penicillin. And a new era was born. Well, Fleming was a spoon carrier because he saw something that many people didn't and acted upon it. So invention and innovation is kind of the next step. What is an invention? I like to think of invention as being like a puzzle. And the inventor is a very good person at puzzle solving. And if you look, you might have an idea. You want a certain desired tissue effect. It might be in the heart, or if you're a urologist, you want a certain effect in the bladder or in the prostate. you need an access method. How are you going to get there? Surgery is merely entering the body, performing some sort of technical procedure, and exiting without complications. So you need an access method. You might also need a certain kind of material in that area of this thing you're going to do. You might even need a certain mechanical principle that you know about. And you may, in some, and more so, we're going to see drug-device combinations. So you kind of got all these things whirling around, but there's a missing link. And that missing link is what you pick up with your spoon. You connect something, and you put that together into a solution for the puzzle. And in this day and age, if you have that, you want to protect that. A lot of people say, oh, I want the world to have my invention. No, if you want your invention to be out in the world, you protect it, because you won't be able to get the money to finance it and develop it without doing that. So don't think you're greedy. You're only doing part of the process that's allow you to go to treat these thousands of millions of people. Let's take an invention I think we're all familiar with, and we would say was a very big invention, the Gutenberg press. The Gutenberg press had nothing new in it. Typeface was known in China for 400 years. Ink was well known. Paper or papyrus was known. And the wine press was known. But nobody had put them together in a combination that changed the world. There was no aha moment. I've written down a calculation and I have a new thing. It's putting things together. And so many things are a combination of old ideas with a missing link there. So one of the other things that I think is so important here is that technology precedes clinical development, many times by decades. But it can be a fairly short time, too, sometimes. And you take one thing in every, I had in companies with my medical advisory board when we met, I had two things on the agenda other than all the stuff you were going to talk about. One was technology watch. What have you seen in something else that has nothing to do with medicine that you think might be valuable in what we're doing? The other was competition watch, which was a much more business-oriented thing of what's happening in the outside world. So these kinds of things are, that kind of thing can shorten, and I think this time frame will continue to be shortened. And where it'll be shortened is places like Rice, places like Stanford, where they have good engineering and medical schools together. I want you to watch this. Oh, we need a sound of this. I forgot. I don't know if we can get it up. I'll just comment on it. Okay. Well, let's. There we go. Let me restart that, and I'll comment. And this is an example. This is a current company that we're very active in, and this is a. This is the ear lens. I'll talk more about it most. Silicon film, this is a concept video, actually more than doubles the frequency range, effective gain of any hearing aid. And our early studies on 13 patients indicate it's going to be great for speech discrimination and noise and improvement of sound quality. The maximum displacement is 1 micron. 1 micron displacement of the eardrum is 114 dB. And the reason you can do this, to hit the threshold of hearing, you only have to move the eardrum the diameter of a hydrogen atom. So before, nobody thought this could be done. Now, why is it done? You couldn't have done it 10 years ago. Other technologies that we do not have to reinvent, they're better photodetectors because of the billions of dollars that put into solar cells, et cetera. They're better batteries because of the billions of dollars that are put into cell phone batteries and et cetera, and all that research. So all this other stuff we can harvest. And I think this is a good example of something couldn't have been done 10 years ago that is facilitated by technology. So what is the role of the entrepreneur? It's different than inventor. We tend to think an inventor is an entrepreneur. That is not necessarily so. It's a different thing. But an entrepreneur can be an inventor. So what is that role? I like to think of the role of the entrepreneur as like a sheepdog. We've all seen something like this film. Where sheepdog go around and one sheep squirts out. The sheepdog's function is to get all those sheep, all of them, through the gate at the same time. And that's what the sheepdog has done. The entrepreneur is very similar to that. Their role is herding resources. I want you to think of unfulfilled clinical need again, and all the resources you have around that need. And think of each of these resources that you need to bring to bear as like magnetic bodies. And if you can push them toward the center and push them toward each other, they will be mutually attractive. So this unfulfilled need is your clinical vision or your idea. And you need some technical, the technical concept you already have. So you need support animals. You need patent lawyers. You need corporate lawyers to get it set up. You may need some management. You may be too busy to manage it, or you may want to manage, but you need some sort of organization or somebody to manage. You may need a certain expertise that you don't need full time. You need about, 10 hours of some world expert on one little thing. So you go get those people interested. And also you need the fuel of the entrepreneur, money. Now that doesn't need to be a lot of money right at first. But what you do as an entrepreneur, you keep nudging these closer together. Sometimes you slow down on one source because they're getting too ahead, and if they get too far ahead in the gate, the others don't know they're there. And so you keep nudging these together, nudging them together, until you get them through the gate at the same time. They then all see the mutual vision. The lawyers, the technical people, the investors all see their advantage in this vision, and you've created a new entity. But as an entrepreneur, you have to continue to be the vision leader. The game changes there. There are other things you have to do, but you're continuing to herd whatever new resources you need to the entity. I like to think also of what kind of environment does the entrepreneur flourish in? Think of a plant. It's a good analogy. You have several things on a plant. You have the seed, we all know it takes to grow a plant. The other thing is the sun and water. And also you need soil to grow a plant. And the seed is the vision, the new idea in the entrepreneurial world. The sun is the fuel, the money that takes it to go. But equally as important in those things is the soil it's growing in, the environment, the social environment around, the willingness to take risks. That is one of the reasons I think Silicon Valley has been so successful, is the soil there is exactly that. The soil there, if you could bounce up, is to say, we grow companies. Because everybody's thinking that way. And I think here at Rice and Houston, you're developing a soil that can be very nurturing of this, and through programs like Jack has and the programs that I've heard about here. But this is needed, and I think that should always be encouraged. We have at Sanford, I'm going to give a pitch for one little program we have called Biodesign. It has two segments to it. One was more started by Paul Yacht for engineers, and a colleague of mine, Tom Cromwell, the chairman of surgery. We worked out a surgical innovation program where surgery residents can come in and spend a year or two and learn. And what we do is teach about how do you analyze a problem, how do you look at your IP, what is the market size, how do you develop things. And these are really arrows in the quiver. And anybody who has an interest in this, I'm sure that if you have an interest, contact me or the biodesign program. I think it'd be worth your while. I'm sure there'll be a program like that here probably very soon. So what are some of the lessons learned in industry? And I'm going to go through these rather rapidly. And these are things that you learn the hard way. One, I call close but no cigar. And that was my first medical invention, which I was describing to Billy Cohn earlier. I was working in a cardiovascular research lab as a medical student in Indiana. My job was to take care of the dogs, prepare them for surgery, and assist the resident in putting in some mitral valves. And part of my job was to put these dogs in ice to cool them down. This was in the 50s. It was a messy job, cold, and I felt, look at all that surface area on this disc oxygen. And what, for users don't know, these aren't used anymore, blood would flow in up to about this level. These discs turn, there's a glass cylinder here in an oxygen atmosphere, and that's how the blood was oxygenated. So I redesigned this, put an axle in here. I could put cold water or hot water in, had these made of thermal conducting material, nickel plated, and we could drop the temperature of a dog in 4 minutes to anything you want and bring it up equally as rapidly. I published a paper on it where it won a National Research Prize, and yeah, it was really good for my career. It really upped my Hooper rating around and everything. It gave me a lot of opportunities in getting into residency. But I made one bad mistake on it. I didn't even think about it being a potential product. I didn't patent it. I didn't do anything with it. I was busy, and I went on. So I would say sometimes you have an idea. How many of you looked at something you see on the back of a box with patent pending or patent number such and such? You think, God, I thought of that idea. How many have done that? You've seen something and you think, I thought of something like that. Well, if you did, the difference between you and the person who did it is you just thought about it, and they did it. So an idea is not worth much unless you make it a reality. It's only a figment of the imagination without activity. So I call that close to no cigar. Loose slips might sink ships. This is a famous World War II slogan. Tell people to keep quiet about your job at the shipyard. Don't say where your son or daughter is stationed in the military and everything. But it equally applies to being an entrepreneur and developing devices. In internship, I was at Perkins, and in the pit, the emergency room there, I'd see all these people come in with broken legs and all sorts of splints, wooden pieces, steel pieces, tapes, strings around them, etc. And I thought, well, a tube under pressure is rigid. Why couldn't we have a sock that is hollow, put air in it, and it would become rigid. It might compress a little if you had a compound fracture and bleeding. You could roll it up on a battlefield. You didn't have to have this big cast and everything. And so I started measuring arm sizes and leg sizes to work this thing out, but I couldn't figure out how to get a valve in, a stupid thing like that. How would you do that and get the air pressure right? Very simple. So I went in the yellow pages, naive me, and found a plastic manufacturer outside of Dallas. And the guy finally came over, and I told him about my great idea and everything. And he kind of nods his head, goes away. I don't hear from him again. And I'm busy trying to be, a good intern night and day. Finally, I left, went out to California. I was in a surgery residence at Stanford and up at San Mateo County, and I was on orthopedics and neurosurgery. And I was there in the emergency room one night, about 2 o'clock, standing by the nurse's station, and an ambulance rolled in. And the ambulance, this guy comes in on the gurney. Here's this guy laying there with this big thing on his leg, and he says, "What's that?" And the ambulance driver, he says, "Oh, that's a new thing, Doc. It's called the air splint. Do you know how it works?" And my heart just sank. I thought, Perkins, you stupid guy. Here you did it again. You didn't act on it. And this is how the air splint works. You put it on and you blow it up. So be very careful. Don't go and tell everybody about how bright you are and what you've done and everything until you have some protection on it. Now, that can be as little as a disclosure that several people have signed or something. But if you have a good idea, go to a patent attorney and try to get a provisional. Get something done. Many people about it, even there. Most venture capitalists are pretty honest people. Some are not. And you got to be a little careful who you're dealing with, because I've seen many things slip along through the other channels, people trying to raise money. And I would just caution you on that. So be a little careful in that way. And I'm not only saying VCs, but anyone, for instance. The other is some Yogi Berra things. If you come to a fork in the road, take it. How many companies are started on one idea, and the cash cow and the thing that makes the company is something else? And for instance, in college, in my first company, we started out to create a burn dressing. And what finally became the cash cow was injectable collagen for wrinkles. Well, the wrinkle market is thousands of times bigger than the burn dressing market. But we were thinking, oh, let's do a burn dressing. And this came out trying to create a biosynthetic eardrum, which is even a smaller market. So Resound, there's a hearing device company. We started out to create a surgically implantable hearing device. And it ended up an acoustic hearing aid company. And Novacep, which we want to show you a bit about in just a moment, started out to be a grin lens micro endoscope for the knuckles. And this is in women's health care. I'm going to describe it to you in a moment in a little more detail. But this turned out to be the cash cow, not what we started to do. One of the things, if you hire a team, though, that allows this transition to occur when you think it should, is have very bright people. If you start, always hire A players. Don't take somebody else because they're just handy or they're cheaper or something. Because everybody wants to join the A team. And if you have A players, you can get in the swamp and you can figure out where the alligators and the logs are and maybe make a mid-course correction. So that's an important point. The other is it ain't over till it's over. How many times are you close to going out of business? And if you just hung in there a little longer, laser scope, which Jack knows about because he was in the laser business, on that we were out of money. We had a prototype that wasn't quite working. This is it, or the product. And we had to get down to a show, ENT show in Anaheim with it. And we had a VC who was wanting to put a couple $1 million in it. And we had to get there. So I won't tell you all the things we did. But we got it down there. The first night there, the VC was coming the second day. The first night there, the machine craps out. We're only getting a few watts out of it anyway. And it goes berserk. So we have the laser physicist from Palo Alto with us fly down. We pay off the exhibit guards to let us in there and work on it all night. And he finally gets the thing pumping along in the morning, putting out about 2 watts. But we didn't need much more than that because all we were doing was burning tomato skins and making little puncture holes in tongue blades to show how it worked. Well, he did some exit interviews, and within 3 weeks, we had his investment. But many people have said, fold it up, it's not going to work. So it ain't over till it's over. Now, you don't want to keep batting your head against the wall when you're hemorrhaging too much, but nevertheless, the same thing is true here with NovaSure, which I'm going to show you. We were out of money for a couple months. I was kind of paying the rent and everything, and we hung in there, and this became a very successful product. So don't give up too easily. The others fail early and often, particularly in prototype development and everything, is you look at time and money, and you have some sort of access like this in the company. Look, in the prototype stage, you could fail a lot because you don't have a high burn rate. But if you spend too long planning everything out for a long, long time to have the perfect device, and you start spending that money and you find out it isn't a perfect device, you're in trouble because you've got a burn rate that's too high. But down here, you can fail a lot more. And the longer you don't fail and revise, the more money you're going to lose in the end, and the more investors are going to walk away. I think that's true in negotiating with VCs and everything. You will fail. I've been turned down by every VC in the Valley in healthcare. And so don't let that hurt your feelings. But go back and say, hey, sorry you didn't like it. I understand it didn't fit your portfolio and that sort of thing. But tell me why you didn't like it. Learn about that. It's kind of like being in high school or college and you're in love with someone and they say, well, wait a minute, I don't think we should see each other anymore. And you're heartbroken. You say, well, what did I do wrong? Okay, pretty basic thing. What did I do wrong? That's how you learn in life. And the same way is this. You go to somebody, they turn it down, find out why they turned it down. Now quickly here, we got to move along. I'm going to get into a couple of things very quickly. Megatrends. Here's some of the things that I think are happening. You can't hear this. You've seen this ad, I'm sure. Implant choices. Is Biomet right for you? That's the way all these commercials end, right? Now, where do you think this came from? Did this come from a trade show? No, it's the ABC Evening News. And that brings up the thing. People are taking personal control of healthcare, and that's why all these things are added. Drugs, even medical implant devices. So if you look at it, I think where this will be a powerful trend is in what I call the Q factor, the quality of life, where people can self-diagnose themselves. You know, if you don't like your vision, you know you probably should get glasses or something. Hearing is the same thing. You can sort of self-diagnose that. Cosmetics, teeth whitening, skin, hair, cosmetic stuff. Also, this is where, with changing healthcare and everything, you're going to see more entry points and more new products coming in that can be sold as as a consumer product with science-based. Those things that were previously professional domain can become consumer domain. Let's take teeth whitening. Started out in the dental office, hundreds of dollars, moved to sort of retail bright smile, and now on your way home, you call me if you don't pass by within 500 yards of someplace you can't buy Crest white strips. So that's a great example of this quality of life moving. That product sold over $100 million in the first year. Now, it had Procter & Gamble behind it. But, another one, more serious, heart defibrillation. Who would have thought 15 years ago you could have a Philips home defibrillator in your hall closet? That's a stretch, but we'll see more and more of these things, I think. The other is general to procedure specific. This is particularly true for medical devices. Medical devices